already done wrestlers who defined the 90s, so it's time for the sequel, the 2000s. Look, if they can still churn out That's What I Call Music every flipping year, I can do a couple of decade-specific videos, alright? And it's not like the 2000s were anything like the 90s anyway, and certainly not in wrestling. In the 90s, you had three major promotions all thriving, but by 2001, WWE was the sole circus in town, meaning that everyone either migrated to them or sacked the graps off entirely. WWE themselves changed dramatically over the decade, leaving the outrageous attitude era behind in favor of the comparatively restrained ruthless aggression period before bowing to the almighty advertising dollar and going PG. It was a decade of transition and many major stars came and went, while some experiments failed and WWE often found the answer in unlikely places. But who do we think of as the defining wrestlers of the 2000s? Who made such an impact that it's almost impossible to think of that 10 years without picturing them? There were plenty of people to choose from, and I've gone for some and left others out that are sure to get plenty of you wound up. So I'll see you in the comments section for a straightener after you've watched me, Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, take you through the 10 wrestlers who defined the 2000s. Join us. Number 10, Jeff Hardy. 2000 was the year where it seemed like the Hardy Boys became genuine established superstars after years of bumping their humps in a bid to get noticed. Though brothers Matt and Jeff and Team Extreme companion Lita all achieved success as a unit, the trio went their separate ways in 2002, and the assumption was that the younger sibling, who had often been likened to a young Shawn Michaels, would become a star. It didn't happen initially due to Jeff's personal issues, though he did show flashes of brilliance, such as in his undisputed title ladder match against the Undertaker, and it took the charismatic Enigma being fired and then rehired several years later for it to really click. When Jeff returned to WWE in 2006 after a spell in TNA, he was a more rounded and mature performer and quickly won over fans all over again. After becoming Intercontinental Champion and enjoying another tag title run with Matt, Jeff set his sights on the world title and incredibly won both the WWE and World Heavyweight Gold. The Risk Taker's popularity had skyrocketed over the previous few years, and he had earned his reigns 100 times over with his hard work and daredevil exploits. A veteran performer who's still going strong today, the 2000s really did show the rainbow-haired warrior at his peak. Number 9, Eddie Guerrero. A small but very talented second-generation star who had made his mark in Mexico, Japan, and the US, most thought that Eddie Guerrero would be considered too small to go far in WWE. But Vince McMahon remarked, "He's tiny," upon meeting Guerrero, confirms that the owner probably didn't foresee him headlining any WrestleManias. Of all of the radicals that jumped ship from WCW, most had Eddie pegged somewhere at the bottom, certainly behind Saturn and Benoit, but he actually adapted the best, becoming a hit as Latino Heat in his on-screen romance with Chyna. Eddie's WWE career was thought to be over due to his struggles with personal demons, but he came back from the brink stronger than ever, returning to do the best work of his career after being let go. Incredibly, Guerrero completed the WWE Grand Slam by defeating none other than Brock Lesnar for the WWE title at No Way Out 2004. It was a great moment, and not just for Guerrero and other members of a similar stature who would have never been considered for the top prize in the past, but also for the fans, specifically the large number of Latino and Hispanic viewers who began tuning in their droves and contributed massively to Eddie's popularity. A fantastic wrestler and a memorable character, Eddie sadly left us way too soon when he passed away in 2005. Though he was only around for half of the decade, he did more than enough to be recognized as one of its defining stars. Number 8, Kurt Angle. Speaking of doing a lot in a short amount of time, hello to you, Kurt Angle. The Olympic gold medalist, one with a broken freaking neck, lest we forget, debuted on WWE television towards the close of 1999 and quickly set about smashing every record he could. He won the European and Intercontinental titles within his first few months and added King of the Ring to his credentials not long after. After less than a full year on the main roster, Angle beat The Rock to become WWE champion. It was a meteoric rise, and was also absolutely justified. Kurt was not only a freak athlete who became a great worker in the blink of an eye, but he also understood the business and was willing to do anything and everything for the show. If that meant making an ass out of himself, so be it. He was content in the knowledge that he could legitimately stretch anyone he wanted like a rubber band if he so desired, and his eagerness to entertain made him compelling to watch. Angle was a wrestling machine and had amazing matches and feuds with everyone, and were it not for those pesky injuries, there's no telling how much more he may have done if he hadn't been released in 2006. Not that it stopped our Kurt, of course, who continued his career in style and saw out the decade on top of TNA. Number 7, The Undertaker. While the dead man rose to prominence in the 90s, it's arguable that his 2000s were even better. He kicked off the decade with a new gimmick, debuting the American Badass character, which he portrayed until WrestleMania 20 in 2004. The biker who made people famous while protecting his yard was a refreshing change from the whole zombie mortician shtick, and a timely update for the new metal era, making the Phenom relevant once more. When that had run its course, he returned to the classic Western gunslinger Taker of old, but updated his style and actually produced his very best matches in the second half of the noughties. His famed WrestleMania winning streak came into prominence and was defended in epic bouts against Edge, Shawn Michaels, Batista, Triple H and Randy Orton, while Taker in general was treated as more of a main event player in the absence of The Rock and Steve Austin. WWE practically built SmackDown around him, and he had cracking feuds on the blue brand with everyone from wrestling machines like Kurt Angle to up-and-comers such as Mr. Kennedy. Despite having put in his time and then some, nobody worked harder than Mark Calloway, and he was rewarded with WWE and World Heavyweight title reigns for his efforts. Number 6, Batista. The man who was told by WCW powerplant trainers that he would never make it in the business certainly had the last laugh, didn't he? A graduate of a famous OVW class that also featured Brock Lesnar, Shelton Benjamin, and some other folks we'll look at in due course, the animal got into the game relatively late, but made up for lost time when he finally made it to WWE television. He fit the bill as Evolution's muscular enforcer, but organically caught on with fans and outgrew the stable, famously turning on leader Triple H and then beating him for the World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania 21. From that point until he decided to walk away and pursue other interests in 2010, Batista was the man. One of the faces of the company, he worked with absolutely everyone, won whatever there was out there to win, was on top on both Raw and SmackDown, rocked it as a cool babyface or as a menacing heel. He was a star, but also he was a much better worker than people ever gave him credit for. How a man that size was able to move the way he did, I will never quite know. It's really hard for us beefcakes to be agile, folks. And to think, the first time most people saw him, his suit jacket didn't have any sleeves, and he was carrying Reverend Devon's donation box. Number 5, Chris Jericho. Jericho was another star who came to WWE with a reputation. By the time he showed up in mid-99, he had already left a legacy in Mexico and Japan and in ECW and WCW. The Ayatollah of rock and roller had to fight through the backstage bull business, enduring all the drama and false starts that come with the territory. He may not have been everyone's favorite cup of piss-flavored tea backstage, but fans couldn't get enough of him, and his popularity grew so much that at the close of 2001, he was selected to beat The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin in the same friggin' night, no less, to become undisputed WWE champion. His reign wasn't exceptional, but by the next time he was tasked with carrying the top strap in 2008, he was more than ready to do so. By then, Y2J had gone through plenty of phases, as well as a WWE sabbatical, and was a performer on top of his game. No longer the wisecracking, poodle-haired fan favourite, but a suit-wearing, long-word espousing villain. The ultimate utility wrestler in some ways, you could put Jericho almost anywhere from opening match to main event, and he could take what he was given and make it not only work, but possibly the best thing on any given show. Number 4, Randy Orton. It's never a guarantee that second or even third generation grapplers are going to be any good, but most could tell from the minute they saw him that Randy Orton had it. A natural in the ring, the son of Cowboy Bob was another graduate of that famed early 2000s OVW class, and he was being groomed for greatness from his early days on WWE television, as evidenced by his inclusion in Evolution. Eventually, the Legend Killer outgrew the group and broke out, becoming a single star in his own right. WWE made him the youngest World Heavyweight Champion ever when he won the title at SummerSlam 2004 at the tender age of 24. From there, Orton was a top player and had long feuds with all the major stars of the day across countless title runs. Able to flip between fiery babyface and the cool, methodical heel when required, the Viper got consistently better as the decade wore on. And crucially, he also grew as a person. Once considered something of an immature problem child, Orton really grew up in front of the WWE Universe's eyes, and he started to carry himself like a proper star and someone who could be trusted by the powers that be. He's not everyone's favourite wrestler, but in the 2000s, Randy Orton was one of WWE's biggest success stories. Number 3, Edge. The 2002 brand split really helped quite a few WWE stars who were trying to break through the glass ceiling, with Edge perhaps benefiting more than most others. After splitting from Christian and going solo, Edge had been trying to find his way as a singles and really came into his own as one of SmackDown's hot prospects. A serious neck injury derailed his main event plans, but he came back strong, only this time as a Raw superstar instead. He was already on the ascendancy when a real-life affair took his character to another level. From then on, there was no looking back, and the Rated R superstar took his chance and became WWE Champion in 2006. A ratings smash, Edge proved that he belonged among the new and highly esteemed company he was keeping, and he was another who showed just how versatile he was in epic programs with opponents such as John Cena, The Undertaker, Ric Flair, Batista, Rey Mysterio, and Jeff Hardy. The Ultimate Opportunist completely shook off his tag team wrestler label over the course of the decade, though he was still good form when partnering up with someone like Randy Orton or Chris Jericho, and was a breath of fresh air to the main event scene. Number 2, Triple H. Triple H beat the Big Show for the WWE title on the very first show of the new millennium. Well, start as you mean to go on, I suppose, because the game absolutely dominated the decade that followed, and it wasn't often that you saw him without gold around his waist. Trips really started to get over in the late 90s when he took over the mantle as the leader of D-Generation X, but only became an accepted main eventer when he ditched the comedy and started being portrayed as the toughest and smartest man in the world. The Cerebral Assassin was one of the best wrestlers in the world at times during the 2000s, though the quality of his work might have dipped from time to time due to injuries. His critics will point to the Reign of Terror, where he was World Heavyweight Champion forever and beat pretty much everyone, as a low point, and like to use his real-life relationship with the boss's daughter as ammunition against him. But the truth is, Hunter backed it all up in the ring, on the microphone, and in every aspect of his game. No pun intended. The plethora of classic matches and moments do not lie, and Triple H was one of the last classic world champions. Number 1, John Cena. With The Rock taking over Tinseltown, Steve Austin retired, and Brock Lesnar doing who knows what, WWE needed someone new to be the face of the company. When he debuted as a clean-cut, ruthlessly aggressive, trunks-wearing, whiter-than-white bread babyface, few could have suspected that John Cena would become that person. But with hard work and determination, charisma, and a canny character change, Cena removed himself from the chopping block and caught fire with the audience, organically getting over to the point that his WrestleMania 21 WWE title coronation was inevitable and welcomed in equal measure. After that, WWE were all in on John Cena, as the Doctor of Thugonomics was absolutely everywhere, tirelessly promoting himself and the WWE brand. And the company couldn't have picked anyone better, really. He was incredibly popular, he looked the part, and he worked harder than just about anyone not named McMahon. He notably had his detractors, those who didn't appreciate what they felt was Cena being pushed down their throat, but like Triple H, Big Match John always rose to the occasion and his work spoke for itself. He wasn't faultless, and his character dilution once WWE fully embraced PG was at times sad to see, but for all his pros and cons, John Cena basically was the 2000s.